Welcome to Off the Page. I am Will Cain, and I'm with Bob Costa. Good morning, Bob Costa.
Good morning, Will. Good to be with you.
Thank you. So, Bob, tell me what's going on here. You've got John Cornyn, who is the head of the National Republican Senatorial Committee, which means basically that he's in charge of spearheading the GOP's push to take back the Senate. You've got Cornyn on one hand endorsing candidates as the establishment pick out there for campaigns for the Senate. On the other, I've got Jim DeMint, South Carolina senator, who is kind of going against the tradition of deference and picking his own candidates, picking his own favorites for each of these senatorial races, and sometimes they are running directly against the establishment picks. Do we have a battle here for sort of the direction of the GOP?
Oh, I think it's a real battle. Jim DeMint's a fascinating guy. He's really come out of a lower profile in 2010 with his Senate Conservatives Fund to start funding guys like Marco Rubio to really ignite a conservative movement against the NRSC.
DeMint found Rubio?
Yeah, DeMint found Rubio. If you look at John J. Miller's cover piece, National Review, a few months ago, that really started the momentum for Rubio. He was already talking to DeMint, and John Miller also did another big profile on DeMint for NR. And what we find out is that DeMint captured Rubio, he recognized Rubio, and he really brought him to the forefront nationally. And if you talk to Marco Rubio today, he still says Jim DeMint's his favorite senator.
And the establishment guys like Cornyn, they were originally behind Crist. I mean, not just did they, right?
They're all behind Crist. That's exactly right.
Okay. And this is taking place in other races as well. I mean, I think isn't the Kentucky race with Rand Paul versus Trey Grayson sort of another battle between these two sides of the GOP camp?
I'm glad you mentioned that because yesterday DeMint did another big endorsement. He came out and endorsed Rand Paul against Trey Grayson in Kentucky Senate race. And a lot of people thought that DeMint, who has good relationship with Mitch McConnell in some ways, wasn't going to wade into a race like in Kentucky where he knew Mitch McConnell's guy, Trey Grayson, was running there. But he's now gone in for Rand Paul, and you see Rand Paul is really building a lot of support down there in Kentucky. And again, Rubio and Rand Paul are two similar characters. They're both going against the establishment. Trey Grayson's the establishment in Kentucky. Rubio is going against Crist in Florida, at least he was before Crist dropped out. And McConnell, though, he's got to be irked because Jim DeMint is going right against one of his proteges in Kentucky. But DeMint doesn't seem to care. You kind of wonder almost what he's working for here. Is he working for the NRC or what?
Let me see if I can get what he's working for, Bob. See if you think this is right. This is I've got a quote from DeMint and a quote from Cornyn. Cornyn's quote, which is also, I think, represented by McConnell and the establishment, is, "We need candidates who can win. What we're in the business of is reinforcing our numbers, and the only way we can do that is by winning elections." This is sort of the pragmatist approach. If we have to endorse moderates, we'll endorse moderates. We need to win over independent votes. The point is the Republican Party needs to win. Now, here's a quote from DeMint. "I'm at the point where it doesn't matter if we win if we don't believe in anything." You've got a pragmatist versus an ideologue. Is that about right?
I mean, that sounds right. Jim DeMint's really the wizard of Tea Party politics. He can come in there and sprinkle a little magic on some races and really stir them up. And I think John Cornyn has the right approach. He's trying to win Senate seats. That's his job. But
you think that path is the right path. I wanted to ask you, which one's better, the pragmatist approach or the ideologue?
Well, I would always say you want to make sure you have the core ideas and the best ideas. But I want to give John Cornyn some credit here because I don't think he and DeMint are both conservative Republicans. But what John Cornyn says is, I'm a conservative Republican and so is Jim DeMint. But conservative Republicans like Jim DeMint and I can't win in every single state in this country. So I think the pragmatic approach is smart if you're going to be head of the NRSC. But I think it's good for Jim DeMint to play a tempest role in this process. I think he's played a very positive role, sometimes to the detriment of candidates like on Tuesday, Dan Coates in Indiana, the longtime Washington insider and former senator, barely won a five-way primary in the Indiana GOP Senate primary. He only got 39-40% of the vote because Jim DeMint's guy, Marlon Stutzman, got about 22%. Others split up the rest of the vote. And so what we see is Jim DeMint's forcing the party to really think critically about ideas and why they're picking candidates.
Right, and we should give Cornyn and the establishment credit as well because they picked winners in New Jersey with Chris Christie. They picked a winner, that was a governor race, but they also picked a winner in Massachusetts in Scott Brown. But so is that approach, which basically seeds that you have to win independents to win races, especially in moderate states, It's the one that Democrats seem to take when they won their big battles 2 years ago. That they essentially picked some liberal moderates who weren't big adherents to liberal orthodoxy to take back the Senate. So I hear you saying this Cornyn approach, this one that the Democrats took, that's the path to victory.
It is kind of. Let me be clear about something else that we don't talk about. As important as DeMint has been in stirring the GOP and urging them to pick conservative candidates, the NRSC has already had the benefit in a lot of states of having conservative candidates. Because if you look at this year, look at someone like Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania, a real firebrand, tough, fiscal conservative. He's already the NRSC candidate. He's already the establishment GOP, where 6 years ago, when he was running against Arlen Specter in the GOP primary in Pennsylvania, he wasn't. So this year, Jim DeMint is capturing something that's already there, an anti-incumbent spirit, an anti-insider, an anti-Washington spirit, especially among the GOP populace. You see it, of course, across all polls that people are anti-incumbent. And so Jim DeMint is part of a movement, but I wouldn't say he's a leader. He's the leader. He is a leader of this anti-incumbent mood and this anti-Washington mood. But at the same time, the NRSC, the establishment, they have guys like Pat Toomey on their side, so they're not working directly against DeMint. DeMint's someone who's almost a coach on the side, yelling them some advice, telling them which direction to go. Sometimes DeMint's right, sometimes he's wrong, but he at least has himself out there on his values, and that's a good thing for the GOP.
I hear you saying it's not always an either or, in other words, but
yeah.
I guess I would say this.
Two peas in the same pod. They're both conservative Republicans, Cornyn and DeMint. Got to remember that.
If it ever is an either or, though, and some of these candidates are going head to head against each other, this is a time. This is my perspective, Bob. This is a time when the Conservative Party is redefining itself. And what better time than when you just got your butt kicked in 2 straight elections? And I, for one, want to be inspired. You know, Patrick Henry said, "Give me liberty or give me death, not give me a little bit of freedom or make me sick." And you know, I don't want to compromise my way to power. I want the William Wallace, John Galt approach. I just want to be inspired.
I like it, Will. and I think you're exactly right. I think if you ask the NRSC off the record, they would say that they were almost blindsided in a way by this year. They thought they had to really get great candidates, people who they thought could win, people like Charlie Crist in Florida, established governors, people like Dan Coates in Indiana, people they thought they could win. But as the year continues to progress, we're realizing that it's the grassroots, the insurgents, the Tea Party folk that are really creating the momentum, that are creating the buzz among the voters. And so the NRSC doesn't maybe have to do so much work in these primaries, whereas they thought they really try to have a chance at winning, they had to do some recruitment. You got to give the NRSC credit. In a lot of primaries, they're just supporting candidates. They're not giving money. They're just trying to give a blessing to someone they think has the best shot at winning. But I think in future years, I've written about this on the corner, you may find that the NRSC may have to stand back a little bit, like you said, to let the voters feel like they're the ones putting the William Wallace conservatives in there. They're the ones who are electing the fighters, not just someone in Washington tapping who they think is a winnable establishment candidate.
Right. Okay, you guys can check out Bob in the corner all over National Review online. You can follow me on Twitter at Will Cain. Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Will. Have a good one.